Well, folks, what we got here today is a real special hunk of American iron. Ain't some fancy sports car. Ain't some overcomplicated computer-riddled gizmo. Nope, we're talking about a proper machine built for work. This here is the 2026 Ford 8N, a machine that takes its roots from a tractor that pretty much shaped the American farm. Now, the original 8N came out in 1947, back when things were simple, dependable, and built to last. And somehow, against all odds, Ford decided to bring that legend back, slapping a modern twist on a classic. Now, before we go any further, let's get one thing straight. This ain't no overgrown lawnmower, and it sure ain't some plastic-clad, fragile excuse for a farm machine. Nope. Ford went ahead and did something right here. They kept it simple, rugged, and gave it just enough technology to make life a little easier without turning it into a rolling nightmare of warning lights and error codes. So, let's pop the hood, or, well, swing open whatever panels she's got and take a peek at what makes this thing tick. Ford stuffed a 2.3-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder under here, borrowing some guts from their EcoBoost lineup, but tuned for torque, not horsepower. That means you ain't gonna be winning. No drag races, but you sure as heck ain't gonna be wanting for grunt when it's time to pull a plow through hard-packed soil. And since this thing ain't got a turbo the size of a grapefruit, it don't make that silly whistle like some tuner car. It's just good, honest power. Mated to that little power plant is a proper manual transmission, 6 gears to row through, plus a creeper gear for when you need to go slower than molasses in January. Ford even threw in an automatic option for those who'd rather let the machine do the thinking. But let's be real, if you're buying one of these, you probably know how to drive a stick, or at least you ought to learn. Now, let's talk about the chassis. Unlike the original 8N, which was about as basic as they come, this one's got a fully boxed frame for strength, modern hydraulics that don't leak all over your barn floor, and, get this, an actual suspension system. That's right, you ain't gotta bounce around like a popcorn kernel in a hot skillet anymore. But don't worry, it still feels like a tractor, just one that ain't trying to beat you up every time you hit a bump. Out back, you got a 3-point hitch setup, just like the old days, meaning you can slap on a plow, mower, or whatever contraption you got sitting around. But here's where Ford got clever. They made it compatible with both old-school implements and new hydraulic attachments. So, if you got Grandpa's rusty cultivator sitting in a shed somewhere, chances are you can still hook it up and get to work. The wheels, classic, big rear tires for traction, skinnier fronts for steering, just like it ought to be. And Ford ain't gone crazy with the styling either. They kept the old-school gray and red paint scheme with some subtle modern touches. It's got LED headlights so you can actually see what you're doing at night, but they ain't some blinding high-tech nonsense that makes everything look like a UFO landed in your field. Inside, well, there ain't much of an inside. You get a seat that won't wreck your spine, a dash with just the gauges you need, none of that touchscreen nonsense, and an actual key to start it. No push-button garbage, no weird security fobs. Just a key that turns, just like it's supposed to. Imagine that. Now, let's talk about what really matters. How's she drive? Well, let's fire it up and see. Sound of an engine turning over, coughing once, then settling into a steady idle. Ooh yeah, that's the good stuff. Got a little diesel-like rattle at idle, but smooths out nice once you give her a little rev. First gear, yep, she's got plenty of torque. Don't even need to give it much throttle. Steering's got that proper mechanical feel. None of that overboosted nonsense you find in modern trucks. And the ride? Well, it ain't exactly luxury, but compared to the old 8N, it's like sitting in a Cadillac. So who's this thing for? Well, if you got a small farm, a homestead, or just like puttering around with old tractors but don't want to deal with 70-year-old mechanical problems, this might just be the ticket. It's simple enough to fix, tough enough to last, and modern enough to make your life easier without taking the soul out of the machine. Price-wise? Well, Let's just say Ford didn't exactly price it like a classic tractor. You're looking at something in the ballpark of 30 grand, depending on options. But when you figure what you're getting, a brand new tractor that won't leave you stranded with electrical gremlins, it starts making a whole lot of sense. So, final thoughts? Ford done good with this one. It's tough, simple, and built to do work. Ain't that what a tractor's supposed to be?